Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. I sincerely appreciate it. He's claiming to know all these things with certainty, and he looks down his nose at me, an atheist, and the rest of the atheist community because we have the audacity to suggest that he doesn't have all of the answers. And he calls us arrogant? Are you kidding me?
If you ever try to bullshit me like that again, I will rip off your arms.
Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and don't worry, the video is about to begin. I just wanted to take a moment to make you aware of my Patreon, the link for which can be found in the description below. Sign up today for as little as £3 per month and you can gain access to a plethora of perks and extras, including downloadable audio-only and ad-free versions of my podcast that you can listen to on the go. You can also have your question answered in a monthly video, and better still, depending on which tier you choose, you could even sit down for a Skype call with yours truly, Magic Skeptic. All that is available and much, much more. All you got to do is click the link in the description below. I hope to see you there. Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and welcome to another episode of the most annoying religious people. This episode might very well be the nuclear option. I'm not kidding, guys. Some of the other people I've featured on this series, they were annoying and their arguments were ridiculous and irritating, and in some cases just downright insane. But the person that you're about to watch is going to make, if you're anything like me, they're going to make your blood boil. So, with that little disclaimer out of the way, guys, you've been warned. If you're pissed off by the time this video ends, don't say that your friendly Magic Skeptic didn't warn you. Okay? Okay? We're agreed? Okay. Let's continue. Let's get into it. Let me introduce you to one Tom Brown. Prepare yourself.
Atheism is the dumbest philosophy to ever face humanity. Why is it dumb? Why is it stupid? Well, number one, it makes no common sense.
I told you, didn't I? I told you. I warned you. It's too late now. You're in. You've gotten this far in the video. That means the hook is in. That means you want to see this thing to the end. If you're like me, you don't like leaving things unfinished. And so, sorry, this is going to be torture. But look, I've got a critique to offer already. Even if it were true that atheism makes no common sense, even if that were true, who cares? When did the universe tell you, or when did you come to the conclusion that the universe owed you any common sense? I mean, have you been paying attention at all to scientific discoveries that are just absolutely perplexing? What about the fact that we can measure to the edge of the universe and we have discovered that it's still expanding, and that every time we measure to the edge of the universe, that expansion rate is speeding up? You want to figure that one out? You want to crack that chestnut? Because that doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. What about the fact that at the quantum level, particles can be in two places at once? What about that? Does that make any common sense? So even if I steelman the proposition here and we assume that he's correct and that atheism makes no common sense, who cares? What kind of an argument is that, you moron? Goodness gracious me. We're not very far into this video. I think I got 10 seconds in to this guy's nonsense, and already I'm interjecting with extended soliloquies. I apologize, dear listener. Let's go back to listen to Tom. I hope you enjoy it.
We all know that the universe had an origin. There was a time when there was nothing.
No, we do not know that, Tom. I'm afraid that is just an assertion. We do not know that. Have you read any physics lately? Have you read any cosmology? Have you spoken to any intelligent person? Have you watched, for example, a Neil deGrasse Tyson video or a Sean Carroll video, or do you have any knowledge about what you're speaking about at all? Because the truth is, we do not know whether or not at one point in the past there was nothing. We have no idea. The evidence is not in on the question. The only honest answer is that we don't know. And here you are asserting that the universe has a finite past and that at one point in the past there was, in fact, nothing. That is a bogus claim. You cannot offer evidence for that assertion, and so I'm just going to move on.
And we all know it's not possible for nothing to create something.
You also can't prove that it's impossible for nothing to create something, because we've never had a nothing to investigate. Sorry. Now, I know, dear listener, this might sound like a rather big ask, but please reflect on what I'm going to say here, because I promise you that what I'm about to say here is actually philosophically relevant and arguably coherent. This intuition that if there's nothing, something can't come from it. I get the intuition because in our reality, there is no evidence ever, not once in the history of humanity or in the history of the universe, does it appear that there is an example of something coming from nothing. Agreed? Okay, great. That's induction, right? So our past experience leads us to believe that it's impossible for something to come from nothing. Fine. But that's when the rule of cause and effect is in force, which it appears to be around our universe. No matter where you are, it is a universal rule, cause and effect. You will not find an effect absent a cause. That's just the way our reality works. But please notice what I just said. That's the way our reality works. Mr. Brown here is talking about a time when there was nothing. Now, first of all, and as I've already pointed out, he hasn't substantiated the claim that at one point in the past there was in fact nothing. But if he's correct, let's steelman the proposition. Let's imagine that at one point in the past, before time and space, there was in fact nothing. Why would one expect the rule of cause and effect to apply there? The rule of cause and effect and the rules and the laws of physics come into force at the moment of the Big Bang. When you go beyond what's known as the Planck time, the rules and the laws of physics break down, which is to say that the principle of cause and effect just doesn't apply anymore. So for all we know, if indeed there was a point where there was in fact nothing, you can't say with any degree of certainty that it's impossible for something to emerge from that nothing. If the rule of cause and effect doesn't apply, maybe it's possible for universes to spontaneously come into existence out of nothing. You can't say that that's impossible. I'm not saying that it is possible. I'm just pointing out that your assertions here don't have any merit to them. They are just assertions. And as Christopher Hitchens once put it, and I feel like I quote this in every goddamn video, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed as such. So I'm sorry, Tom Brown, but you're going to have to try again.
So where did the first elements of the universe come into existence? Well, in order for that to happen, you have to have someone outside the universe make it. That's common sense.
No, Tom, I'm sorry. That's not common sense. You don't get to make that claim. Existence is necessarily spatial and temporal. For something to exist, it has to exist in a particular space at a particular time. That is just a fact. Existence is a spatio-temporal phenomenon. And you've just said that it's possible for a being to exist outside of space and time in a context of nothingness, and that in that nothingness, they can bring something into existence. Don't tell me that that's common sense. Don't tell me that that's common sense. That's a completely incoherent idea. You're saying that something can exist, and existence is spatio-temporal, in a state of nothingness. That is completely and absolutely incoherent. But look, I'm going to follow my own rules here. The universe doesn't have to make sense to us. Common sense doesn't have to apply. As I said, quantum mechanics and discoveries in cosmology have revealed that reality can be extremely unusual. It can be absolutely outside of our common sense. Things can happen that make no common sense to us at all. So maybe it's possible, Tom Brown, maybe it's possible that something can exist outside of space and time. Maybe that's possible, but don't tell me that it makes common sense. You can't just say that something coming from nothing makes no common sense, and then in the very next breath allege that a being existing in that nothingness in order to make the something happen is common sense. That is just babble. That is insanity. You are ridiculous, sir. Right? So anyway, look, this is a joke. This is really, really silly. This guy is just making assertions about what makes common sense and what doesn't. And all he's really telling us here is that he's religious. He has a religious presupposition. He is a believer in God. I'm not familiar with his history, but I can only imagine that he was raised this way and that he thinks this way. And so he's just trying to find evidence that fits his preconceived notion. He's not engaging in any real critical thinking here. And then he has the audacity to call atheism dumb without even understanding what it is. Because atheists don't have to believe any of this stuff that he's alleging. Atheists don't have to believe that the universe came from nothing. I'm an atheist, and you know what my answer is? I don't know. And I think that's the only honest answer. I can't help but wonder if this guy really believes in honesty. Let's continue.
But the second reason why atheism is dumb and stupid and foolish is that it's bankrupt morally. Even atheists admit that there is a moral universe.
No, we don't. I am a moral anti-realist. And if any of you, dear listeners, are interested in understanding my position on morality, I've done a full podcast on this subject with one Kane B, where we explored the question of whether or not the Holocaust is factually wrong. And spoiler alert, I don't think it is factually wrong. I think it's wrong as a matter of preferential statement. My opinion is that it's wrong, but I'm not convinced that morality deals with factual questions. I'm not convinced that morality deals with facts at all. I have a non-cognitivist view of morality, which is to say morality is actually just a human invention, that our sense of right and wrong has to do with our evolution. Our sense of right and wrong has to do with opinion and preference. And I think there's good evidence for that when you look at the history of humanity, and that humans thought that certain activities were right or wrong depending on historical time period and so on. But look, I won't do a full explanation of my view on morality right here and now, but suffice to say, this assertion by Mr. Tom Brown here that atheists are people who acknowledge and admit that there's a moral universe is just not true, because I am an atheist and I do not admit that we live in a moral universe. I don't believe in objective morality. So I'm sorry, Tom, but you're going to have to try again, my friend.
Even atheists admit that there is a moral universe, that there is a sense of what's right and wrong. So atheists have to try to grapple with, where do we get our sense of ethics and morals? So in the end, without God, then atheists begin to change those moral fabrics. And before you know it, atheists, they adopt a morality based on natural evolution, that only the strong survive, only the strong rule the weak, only the smart conquer. So what happens is, in the end, unborn babies that are weak and unprotected, slaves that could not fight for themselves, minorities that could not defend themselves.
These are all ridiculous assertions, and each one is more ridiculous than the last. Atheists don't do any of these things. Well, I mean, I don't even know what he's referring to. When you look at the global stage right now, you can see that there are numerous atheistic, or what you might call secular countries. Look at the Scandinavian countries, right? Most people in Scandinavia are atheists, and the wheels don't appear to be coming off the project of their civilization, right? It's functioning just fine. And in fact, in many ways, Scandinavian societies do better than other countries that are religious. But again, I won't get into this in great depth right now. I'm just pointing out that when societies become secular or atheistic, they don't just become ravenous hellholes of immorality and murder. That's just not true. When you dedicate yourself to secular humanism and the ideals of treating your fellow man decently and kindly, you don't end up in a hellhole. You don't end up in a context of complete rampant immorality. That's not what happens at all. So this idea that atheists are just immoral thugs that are more likely to murder you just doesn't hold any water when you look at the global stage. This is just an ugly, despicable assertion, and anybody who takes it seriously is just not very well informed, I'm afraid. And the real laughable thing about all of this is that when you look at religious societies, some of the most religious societies on earth happen to be the places on earth where you will reliably be mistreated. I'm thinking about certain countries in the Middle East, which are so incredibly attached to their religiosity, and yet these are the places where women can't leave the home without a male present. These are the places where a woman's word is worth half that of a man's. And so, I'm sorry, but religiosity is not necessarily coupled with morality. And I'm just talking about today. If we search through the annals of history, do you really want to go down that road, Tom? Do you really want to have that conversation? Because history is replete with examples of extreme and odious religious behavior that resulted in the deaths of millions. And if you're going to allege that atheism is equally responsible for that, you're just full of it. People often pivot to the 20th century and they want to talk about Stalin and Mao, who were self-avowed atheists. Fine. But draw for me the connective line between their atheism and what they did. The reason Stalin did what he did didn't have anything to do with a commitment to skepticism. It didn't have anything to do with a commitment to humanism. These are the ideals that atheists tend to subscribe to. You do not find that societies who commit themselves to science, reason, skepticism, and humanism, they don't end up like Stalinist Russia. That's just not the case. If you can show me a society where a commitment to humanism and skepticism resulted in that outcome, I will concede the argument, but you won't be able to find one, because that is a complete nonsense. You don't get to pretend that you have the high ground here, Tom. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do better.
In atheism, in the end, it's only the strong that should survive. So everyone else is weak and sickly, should all die and go by themselves, you know?
He is confusing Darwinism with atheism here. This is really, really silly. The theory of evolution does suggest this is what natural selection is. Natural selection is when the weak die and the strong survive. The strong pass their genes into the next generation. That is what natural selection is. Now, if you're an atheist, that doesn't necessarily mean you believe in evolution, by the way. Those two aren't necessarily connected. But if you're smart, you believe in evolution because the evidence is overwhelming. But believing in evolution is not the same as practicing natural selection and Darwinistic policies. Those are completely separate things. Accepting the fact of evolution by natural selection is not the same as championing or supporting or campaigning for a Darwinistic government. Those are non sequiturs. I can acknowledge that natural selection plays a role in nature and that evolution explains how there are so many species on this planet and what have you, without wanting a Darwinistic society. I don't want a Darwinistic society. I'm firmly in favor of social safety nets and humanitarian causes and charity and goodwill. And yes, I'm in favor of all those things, despite the fact that I'm a sinful, despicable atheist, Tom. Right? Jesus. Funny I say Jesus, but this is a joke. This is disgusting. This is the same old tired rhetoric that's been spouted from the pulpit for centuries in order to denigrate atheists and rob us of our humanity. But I suppose we're the evil ones. Listen to the bile that's coming out of his mouth and ask yourself, dear listener, which of us is the immoral one? Which of us is the mean one? Which of us is the despicable one? Which of us is the irrational one? I think if you ask yourself when you search your feelings, the answer to all of those questions is incredibly obvious, if I do say so myself.
And so we have atheism that is weak morally. And the few times that a country decided to implement atheism as its official philosophy, it all turned into communism. Look at the Soviet Union and look at China. Communism is the natural outgrowth of atheism.
I don't like communism either, but I don't see how that's relevant here. Communism sucks, fine. What does that have to do with whether or not there's a God? You see the non sequiturs here? He might as well have said atheists are bad because I don't like cheeseburgers. What? There is a risen to God because I love my furry blanket. This doesn't make any sense at all. Even if it were true, again, I'll steelman the proposition, even if it were true that atheism necessarily leads to communism, that wouldn't mean that there suddenly is a God. That wouldn't mean that at all. And while I already discussed this briefly a moment ago, here you get the same old tired assertion that the Soviet Union and that the communist regimes that resulted in the deaths of millions were atheistic, and so therefore atheism is the problem. Again, this is a correlation without having established a causation. Stalin also had a mustache, so too did Hitler, so therefore mustaches are the cause of genocide and crazy leadership that leads to the death of millions. You see how ridiculous that argument is? Well, you pointing out that Stalin is an atheist and that Mao is an atheist and what have you, and that therefore that's what caused their villainy, is no different at the level of principle from me pointing out that Stalin and Hitler have mustaches and that that's what led to their villainy. You can assert that in the presence of their atheistic thinking that they knew they weren't accountable to God and so that's why they did what they did. You can say that all day long, but you haven't proven it by saying it. And meanwhile, there's an immense amount of evidence on the scale which seems to suggest that what actually caused the murder in the millions that happened in these places was a dedication to a cult of personality, was the suspension of science and reason, right? These societies were not paragons of skepticism and dedication to the scientific method. They were completely cult-like in their dedication to their leader. And the ideas that were promulgated in these societies were completely anti-scientific. The bogus genetic nonsense of the Nazis, for example, that Jews had a different skeletal structure and a different brain and all that nonsense. None of these ideas stand up to scientific scrutiny. And all atheists do, for the most part, as far as I can tell, is ask people to align themselves to the evidence. And when you align yourself to the evidence, and when you follow the evidence where it leads, and if you commit yourself to secular humanism, the idea that we should treat our fellow man kindly, even if there isn't a God. When you commit yourself to those ideals, you do not get the Gulag. You do not get the Holocaust. And if you want evidence of that, just take a look once again at the Scandinavian countries, which are largely secular and atheist and humanist, and you will find that these societies are flourishing. Let's move on.
With atheism, there is no freedom, because to an atheist, they're the smart ones, and they should rule the dumb ones. So there's an elitist mentality that forms within atheism. It's an arrogant philosophy. It's a philosophy where people don't have freedom because people are too stupid to exercise that freedom.
The allegation of arrogance actually just takes the biscuit. I'm really struggling to keep my cool here right now. This guy believes that he has a personal relationship with the creator of the universe. He thinks that he knows the origin of life. He thinks that he knows morality, the difference between right and wrong, and that he knows that objectively. He thinks that he can pray and have a relationship with the person who made reality itself. He's claiming to know why there is something rather than nothing. He's claiming to know in the past that there really was nothing, and that nothing became something because of a magic god who lives in the fucking sky. He's claiming to know all these things with certainty. And he looks down his nose at me, an atheist, and the rest of the atheist community because we have the audacity to suggest that he doesn't have all of the answers. And he calls us arrogant? Are you kidding me? How dare you? Christianity is the most arrogant religion on the planet. You think you have the way, the truth, and the life. You think you have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe and that we were created in his image. And you call me arrogant. Give me a break. Oh, let's move on.
And to an atheist, they must tell the society how they must live and what they must believe in.
I think this video might contain the most interjections of any video I've ever made ever. But this is bogus. No, atheists are not trying to control other people and how they live. What he might be referring to here, and I assume it's almost certainly the case that what he's referring to, is that atheists merely ask politely that we have separation of church and state. What he's talking about, which is absolute insanity, is that Christians don't get their own way all the time anymore. Yes, sorry, if you're going to allow a Christian nativity scene, you have to also allow Muslims to put something up if they want to. You also have to allow other religions to display their iconography and symbology if you're going to be allowed to do so. Christianity doesn't get priority in the public square anymore, and it shouldn't, because we live in pluralistic societies. Why should Christianity get center stage? Why should it get special treatment when we are all paying taxes? This is the whole point of church-state separation. If you want to give Christianity a privileged position, you are entitled to open your own private establishment in which you can do that. But you don't get to do that with public money in the public square. The public square is equally accessible to all. And so no, in schools, you don't get to jam Christianity down children's throats using the taxpayer dime. You don't get to do that because not everybody is a Christian and not everybody wants some of the morally repugnant teachings of Christianity jammed down their children's throats. This is not evidence of atheists forcing others to live by their morality or their ideas. This is actually just called fairness. You don't get to use my money to support and spread your religion. You don't get to use my money to indoctrinate other people's children. You don't get a privileged position anymore. That's over. Buy a time machine and go back to the medieval period if you want Christian centrism. But not anymore. That day has come to an end, and people like me are not going to remain silent. And you have the audacity and the cheek to represent this as atheists trying to control Christians and trying to control people and get them to march to their orders. That's not what's happening. Separation of church and state is not atheist control. It is simply fairness. It is the acknowledgement that Christians should not be able to dominate. It is the acknowledgement that taxpayer money should be equally accessible to all, and that if Christians are going to get to put up their signs and symbols, and if Christians are going to get to teach in their schools, then other people get to open their schools. The church doesn't get a privileged position anymore, and that's the end of it. But of course, this dope can't think for 2 seconds that this is actually just about fairness.
And so in atheism, when it is practiced, we have seen terrible outcomes. I'm here to tell you the truth. If you're an atheist, you have adopted one of the dumbest and foolish philosophies known to the human race. And maybe that's why there's only 4% that even claim that to be atheists. Because, as the Bible says, a fool has said in his heart, there is no God. It is foolish to embrace atheism.
Such wisdom. Because we're a minority, we must be wrong. And he finishes the video with the most obvious fallacy of consensus ever. Right, Christians outnumber atheists, therefore atheists are wrong. This guy is a prime time, fillet cut moron. The most perverse, the most exquisite example of religious bigotry, the most exquisite example of irrationality. This guy is a grade A moron. And I apologize, dear listener, for subjecting you to this insanity, but I felt the need to tear this guy to shreds. And if you don't mind my saying so, I think I did a pretty good job. What do you think? If you agree with my criticisms, jump into the comments below and let me know. If you don't agree with my criticisms, equally jump into the comments below and let me know, and we can hash it out down there. The conversation is what matters, and if I missed something, or if I got something wrong, or if you have some constructive criticism for me, dear listener, I would love to hear it in the comments below. If you liked the video, drop a like, and if you've been enjoying my content more generally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and while you're at it, check the bell notification icon, because that way you'll be updated as and when my latest videos go live. And last but not least, if you love my content and you support my mission and you want to become a more committed supporter, perhaps the day is today when you become a patron. Patrons gain access to all sorts of perks, bonuses and extras, including having their questions answered in videos. They get access to my audio-only, ad-free and downloadable version of my podcast so that they can listen to it on the go or at the gym or what have you. Or, you know, perhaps you'd be interested in having a Skype call with yours truly, Magic Skeptic. If any of that sounds interesting or intrigues you, check the description and you will find the link to my Patreon, that is, and I hope to see you there. And guys, to those of you who have already signed up, thank you very much. I'm enormously grateful to my patrons for their support and their generosity. And to the rest of you for watching and getting to the end of this video, thank you very much. And guys, I'll have to leave it there. I hope to see you in the next one. All the best. Bye-bye.